professor of in Delhi from Delhi University. I just wanted to add that I was also the director of the Developing Countries Research Center, and we'd have an annual grassroots politics colloquium where we would follow activist struggles against environmental degradation and displacement across the world. So it's with great anticipation that I look forward to today's presentation. I'm also a core member of the core group of the Democratizing Work Initiative, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to the third workshop of the third edition of our global workshop series. We are very, very happy to have you guys with us today. Today, we look at an extremely important topic, unveiling the human and environmental costs of whales mining disaster. Through a powerful documentary produced by the, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Guaicuy Institute, we'll explore the traumatic forced removals in Antonio Pereira, Brazil, where families in the self-rescue zone face mental health struggles, fractured communities, and environmental devastation caused by whales mining practices. Our speaker, Hariane Santos, will present key insights from the documentary, shedding light on the urgent need for justice, accountability, and sustainable solutions. I'll give very brief introduction. I can't do justice to the very impressive resumes of each speaker. So forgive me because of time constraint. I'll just introduce you briefly. Hariane Santos Alves holds degree in journalism from the Federal University, UFOP, and business administration from FASB, along with an MBA in digital marketing. Since 2002, she has been coordinating the social communications team at the independent technical advisory body of Antonio Pereira, the institute which has produced this document. Is the author of Cloud Approaches the Windows, which tells us about the trauma of a family affected by the Fundão Dam collapse. She has worked with communities impacted by mining since 2015, and she has extensive research experience and publications of this research on environmental damage in mining areas. As a journalist, she has contributed a great deal to major newspapers and supported journals. And we look forward to listening to her today. Our second speaker, she will be introducing the whole team. Our second speaker, Anya, is an associate professor in law and work at the Department of Law and Legal Studies at Carleton University, Canada, Ottawa. Her interdisciplinary socio-legal research focuses on regulation of work as a socio-ecological process and engages with feminist and political ecology approaches to reconsider the interface of work and environmental degradation, as well as to explore alternatives that facilitate more sustainable work methods. Karina Gomes Barbosa teaches journalism, gender, and human rights at the Federal University of UFOP, where she also coordinates the Gender and Sexuality Media Watch project. She holds a PhD in Masters in Social Communication from the University of Brasilia and has a background in journalism and international relations. A feminist researcher, Karina focuses on gender-based violence, girlhood, and human rights issues in the media. And again, like her other colleagues on the panel, she's worked with communities since 2015 who have been impacted by the Fundão Dam collapse in Mariana. She's a scientific director of the Brazilian Journalism Teaching Association, EBE, and is involved in networks focused on childhood, youth, and gender. After this the Wage Indicator, we are also joined today by the amazing Wage Indicator Foundation team. Wage Indicator collects and shares labor market information from across 208 countries through research reports and its local language websites. In 2024, they published living wage benchmarks for 173 countries, making living wage data accessible and transparent to empower workers, trade unions, and decision makers. The team has played a key role in enriching and structuring our workshop discussions by ensuring that our conversation remains practical, grounded in real world implications, and actionable for everyone involved. We deeply appreciate their invaluable contribution to making this dialogue meaningful. After these very brief introductions, may I call upon Hariane Santos Alves to give an introduction to the presentation of their research and activism in space. Ariane, we have 20 minutes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Wait a minute, please. Right. Can you see the slide? Yes?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I am Hariane Alves. I'm from Guaicuy Institute. It is a pleasure to be here today, participating in the Democratizing Work Global Workshop. The Cost of Vale is a documentary produced by Guaicuy and an institute that advocates for the democrats' defense of Ouro and serves as an independent technical advisory for territories affected by the dam break in Brumadinho and the Dr. Dam, which was at risk of collapsing in the year 2020 in Antonio Pereira, a district of Ouro Preto in the state of Minas Gerais, Brazil. The documentary was produced to report the damage caused by a tailing dam that did not break and to highlight the human rights violations suffered by the district population. The main focus is on the people who were removed from their homes. The Cost of Vale is the first Brazilian documentary about a self-rescue zone and the social and environmental devastation caused by predatory mining. You may have never heard of what it is a self-rescue zone is, but if you have read about the dam rupture in Mariana and Brumadinho, both in the state of Minas Gerais, you know that wherever the mud passes, is buried animal, rivers, dreams, ways of lives, homes, and people. In Antonio Pereira, there was no dam collapse, but hundreds of families lost their homes because they lived in an area that would be covered by tailing mud. If the Doctor dams were to break, this is the self-rescue zone. The zone is a region located up to 10 kilometers from the dams, or the distance equivalent to 30 minutes to save one life in the event of potential flood. The national mining agents prohibit the zones from being inhabited or have the presence of humans and animals. In the event of a collapse, people and animals in the self-rescue zone of Antonio Pereira would have 30 seconds to escape. No one can escape in 30 seconds. To get here at the hotel, I had already lived through the dramatic day of the 19th of January. I arrived here with a small suitcase, think I would stay for only 5th day because that was what I was told. This here in the slide is Antonio Pereira, as the zone of rescue zone. This here is the dam the Doctor Dam, and the district. So can you see the proximity to the Doctor Dam whenever by the mining company in Vale? Here we have the Doctor Dam, and if in case of breaks, all this reject here, staying in Antonio Pereira. So now when I say the Cost of Vale is the first Brazilian documentary about a self-rescue zone. And this is now when Antonio Pereira is. Continue here. And I come completely unprepared, but emotionally and psychologically for what arrived me here at the hotel. So I had a small suitcase with my child for 15 days, and 3 years have passed, says Ana Carla Cota, removed from Vila Residencial Antonio Pereira in the year 2022, who was been living in a hotel ever since, trying to rebuild her lives amid unsettling and traumas caused by the mining company in Vale. In the documentary about self-rescue zone, the multidisciplinary team at the Guaicuy captured the histories of these families who saw their lives plans turn into war zones, with houses left empty and abandoned by Vale. The film is about people suffering from mental illness due to the unsettling of the future, and who, even when faced with the largest company in the world, continue to fight for justice and reparation. This far here is Bento Rodrigues, a district of Mariana, after the collapse of Fundão Dam, always também by the mining companies Vale, Samarco, and BHP. So who does mining affect? Now, this is the great ask we talking about here. So this is Continuo Bento, the first day of the dam collapse. And this is Brumadinho. So in the first day in the collapse, of the B1 dam of the Córrego do Feijão mine. Mining companies like Vale and Samarco responsible for the dam failures in Mariana and Brumadinho, like you see in these photos, continue to operate in Antonio Pereira. The district is rich in minerals and affects not only this company, but others as well. The population continues to suffer from the increase in mining activities, with extract from their lands, blockades to Ouro takeaway jobs, and put them at risk of experiencing an abandoned failure. The Cost of Vale is a denunciation, is a cry for help. It is a documentary that shows that laws and the current mine model urgently need to be changed. In Brazil, we have more than 20,000 dams. This is just in Minas Gerais. We have 6,005, and we have here 6,000 people affected by the ruptured Doctor dams in Mariana and Brumadinho, and more than 1.5 million people affected by mining in our territory, Brazil. I'm talking about this and I'm not showing you this slide, so sorry for this. But I can say again, who does mining affect? Who is these peoples? So these peoples on Antonio Pereira who living affects every day by the mining, by the Vale, by the Samarco and other companies. This is the people who live and who fight for a change on what's happening right now. So now I invite Professor Karina to continue the discussion, and I'm back soon.
Good morning to you all. I'm going to share my presentation here. Just a minute.
Karina, yeah, call upon you, yeah.
Yes, just. Are you seeing it in full wide screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you all for this invitation and for the opportunity to talk about these issues that are in the core of my action as a professor, as a researcher, since the rupture in 2015. And today I would like to talk about voice. What is voice? In proximity to the discussion undertaken by Keja Silverman, voice is authority and presence. To speak, to emanate or produce voice is to manifest discursive authority and to create presence. Isabel Capello Gil, a Portuguese researcher, says that voice is at the sign of a wider embodiment of the social, the sexual, and the political, where physiology meets metaphor at the crossroads between the invisibility of silence and the visible sensoriality of the discourse. Why am I saying this? Although voice is a condition of human beings, the politics of voice is not evenly distributed in our society. Therefore, not everybody can have the authority or be present in discourse and in the public sphere. This raises questions such as, who has the authority to speak? Once spoken, whose voices have the power to produce change? Which voices mark the presence of a body, a subject in its integrity? And when I arrived in Mariana to teach journalism in 2014, my students wanted to do a feature on the situation of mining workers. Even though the city has a large number of miners, sometimes entire families work for Vale or Samarco for generations, no one spoke to us. They couldn't. They were bound by NTA contracts that stripped them of their voices. The mining companies took their voices away in exchange for the opportunity to work. In order to make a living, they could not speak freely. We did the feature with only anonymous sources, and the feature was received awards at all. As André Carvalho puts it, since the beginning of the state in the 17th century, the mining activity in Minas Gerais has been surrounded by silence, one of the most eloquent of which is that of journalism. Silence or omission, I ask. I believe both, entangled to an economic minor dependence that has confined the press to silence about all the violence that occurs in the mines of Mariana and Ouro Preto. The journalistic discourse is said to be multivocal. We listen to a diverse range of people, consult a variety of documents, laws, experts, to accurately narrate the events. This composes what we call journalistic sources. This is at least the theory. The break of Fundão Dam in Mariana and then the collapse of Dam 1 in Brumadinho exposed the abyss between journalism principles and its practice. I've been following this coverage since 2015, and I can say that the dominant voices are those of the mining companies. They have the authority to declare if a dam is safe or not, even though they were the ones who failed to ensure safety or falsely claimed it in 2015 and 2019. When an event such as a rupture threat occurs, like in Antonio Pereira, reporters ask the companies if the dam is secure. They're the ones who speak, assuring the communities, the worker, the press, that there is no danger. But there's always danger. For example, in the case of the hegemonic coverage of Barão de Cocais, a city whose communities were forcibly removed because of Gongo-Soko Dam instability, Vale, the mine's owner, has been the primarily source to assure the public, the families, the labor force about the security of this structure. 5 years ago, people from Socorro, Tabuleiro, Piteiras, and Vila do Congo were removed from home, facing a risk of collapse. And they were never allowed to return until now, and the dam didn't collapse. Vale practices what has been called dam terrorism, a mode of permanent frightening and terrifying state inflicted on affected communities, designed to expel people from the surroundings of their deadly structures. This allows them to continue to operate in silence, having to speak to no one except their shareholders. They choose when to speak, about what, and whom they speak to. In Barão de Cocais, there's an even more disturbing practice. When the government is asked to independently assure the security level of the dam, the civil defense says that Vale assured the safety. So when the press relies in the voices of the government, the press is relying on the voice of the mining company. Scarcely in the press, we find traces of the voices of the affected people in journalism. We do not find traces of the mine workers. When they are invited to speak or allowed to speak, their voices are set apart from those with authority, as if the issues concerning them were of minor importance. Their worries, their fear, their losses have much less volume. This way, their voices cannot produce a concrete presence in the public sphere. They haunt the journalist's coverage as shadows with little or no bodily presence, no impact at all, appearing in short stories and in testimonies here and there. This has also been the case with the coverage of Fundão Dam. In those 10 years, journalism focused on the people affected. Only right after the event, yearly, when journalists come here to remember every November 5th, and in cases such as the resettlements of Bento Rodrigues and Paracatu. Apart from these specific periods, journalism doesn't seem interested in hearing the voices of those who are there, and lived and still live at the core of the catastrophe. For 10 years, they have been claiming that there weren't 19 deaths, there were 20, because a woman who was pregnant suffered an abortion escaping from the mud. But the dominant journalism doesn't hear it. Everywhere, as I'm showing you, the toll of death is 19. Why? Because that's the number acknowledged by the mining companies. These are the dead they recognize. This is also the case in Brumadinho, where the families claim that there were 222 victims, not the 270 recognized by Vale. So why doesn't journalism listen to those voices who dare to challenge the official discourse? Why doesn't journalism challenge the abhorrent term self-rescue zone that Ariane referred to, given by the mining multinationals to designate those places where people are left to save themselves from a threat they don't see and they don't know when it's going to strike? Why does journalism adhere to the dehumanizing speech of the mining sector? The coverage of Antonio Pereira's forced removal, or also does not depict the death of the continued human rights violation without an end in sight. No one questions the presence of the signs indicating self-rescue zones, the signs that Ariane has shown. No one questions the scope of the nonsensical projection floods. The threat posed by Vale's Dr. Dam does not affect the credibility of the company. This is why independent, popular, resistant journalism and autonomous communication initiatives are so important. These have been the only places where the voices of those who are at the edge of existence are listened to. As Isabel Capeloa Gil points, these are the products in which human voices becomes the location of strategic resistance. In the Cost of Vale documentary, we hear not only the sinister siren sounds, we travel to the heart of the crime, where the menace is invisible, a mudslide that never arrives, and yet constant. The film invites us to listen and pay attention to the testimonies of those who can die in 30 seconds. It tells us stories of living in hotel rooms for years, stories of people who lost the dreams of a lifetime, such a bakery, a home ownership, and people who were left with no information whatsoever in a limbo of uncertainty. In the context of a media incapable of or uninterested in confronting the mining industry, independent media has been a tool, a solace, and an ally in building resistance against those unimaginable and repeated violences. It is paramount that we keep producing those films, writing features with counter-grain narratives, with testimonies of those who survived to tell. The communication I believe in, the journalism I teach and support, is that of the people. For me, the only possible journalism and communication should be that which, in the wake of a story, an event, asks, who are the most vulnerable? Those are the first, sometimes the only voices that matter and that we should hear. Those are the people who need to be made present and visible, people we need to believe in. Like the film does, we need to produce the presence of those subjects in the public sphere. The mining money has plenty of places in media to make their speeches. The affected people sometimes don't have a place at all. And it is an ethical imperative for a communication committed to the human being, to the planet, to guarantee a place to hear the voices in suffering, a space where those voices can produce speech, authority, power, and change. Thank you very much, and I'm welcome to join the discussion.
Ania, may I ask you to make your presentation? Thank you.
Yes, one moment, please. Let me just share my slides. Are you able to view my slides?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And you can hear me? Yes. One moment. Okay, so thank you very much. I wanted to start by thanking Instituto Guaicuy for making this film, and of course organizers for inviting me to this workshop. I also wanted to briefly recognize the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, on which Ottawa is built and from which I am joining you today. So I know the community of Antonio Pereira because this is one of the case studies in a research project that I coordinate. And the project which is funded by Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, involves collaboration, or is carried out in collaboration with colleagues at Federal University of Ouro Preto, which is the municipal center of which Antonio Pereira is a district. So Flavia Massimo, who is supposed to be here today, Natalia Lisboa, they're both professors with whom I'm working, and there's a large team of graduate students who have also been involved in this project. I also wanted to acknowledge that Hariane and Instituto Guaicuy have been instrumental and very helpful in helping us facilitate access to members of the community, and we've been working together for some time. My comments today will revolve around the situation that the film depicts, but I hope to put it in a wider context and also related to some of the issues that our project seeks to investigate. So the self-rescue zone, as a space of exclusion, or indeed as a space of expropriation and enclosure, as one of the film's interviewees, Professor Daniel Neri, characterizes it, to me, in many ways represents the wider regulatory conundrums inherent in the far-reaching and complex socio-ecological impacts that mining or extractive activity generates for people's livelihoods and quality of life. And during our project's first phase, we talked with many activists, unionists, policy actors, and so on about the governance issues and the relative ability or relative inability of these actors to respond to what is happening on the ground in Antonio Pereira. And the self-rescue zone, or ZAS, for short, frequently came up as a legally constituted space that nonetheless evades regulation. Then zooming out, the second point I want to kind of make is about the geopolitics of socio-ecological disasters, like the ones in around Minas Gerais, including in Antonio Pereira, and the narratives that are currently generated and mainstreamed by large mining companies like Vale and the governments that help them thrive and profit about the so-called green mining and sustainability that's possible and inherent in extractive development. So to make this second point, I want to then contrast Vale's actions in Antonio Pereira with its longer-term actions in Sudbury, Canada, which is the other mining affected community that we are doing our research in. And before I make these 2 points, I just want to quickly tell you a little bit about the project itself. So our project, the wider project, looks at the socio-ecology of labor and diverse livelihoods, and we're specifically aiming to investigate the role of law in shaping the relationships between labor and environmental conditions in the context of communities that are affected by extractive development. We are interested in the consequences that regulatory choices have for people's work, their lives, and environmental conditions more widely. And we are also interested in regulatory alternatives that better support socio-ecological sustainability and community justice. Okay. So in some ways, then, our research project connects very much with the key tenets of the Democratizing Work project, namely the importance of ensuring that different forms of work and livelihoods are recognized, valued, and supported, including those that foster economic diversity, including non-capitalist ways of organizing productive and social reproductive activities and relating to other humans through the process of work and to the wider environment. When economic development eradicates these possibilities and places workers in position where their livelihood is tied to disaster, danger, and destruction of their own and other people's communities, then something has gone profoundly wrong, and workers should not have to make these sorts of impossible choices. But of course, as our project kind of explores, mining affected communities are often sites where impossible choices are forced on a daily basis. Even if sometimes they are, mining communities are also places of working class pride, tradition, and so on. People are making impossible choices. And I already mentioned that our project involves 2 case studies of mining affected communities. Antonio Pereira is one of them, and then Sudbury, which is in Northern Ontario in Canada on Wanapati and Atikaneksheng Anishinaabe territories. Antonio Pereira, of course, is in the municipality of Ouro Preto, which is in South Central Brazil, state of Minas Gerais, and of which you learned in this film. And in both of these places, Vale is a key corporate actor involved in extractivism. So I just want to tell you very briefly about Sudbury because it's relevant for the second point I want to make. This is a quintessential Northern Ontario mining town. Although its economy has diversified in more recent years, it was at one point the world's largest source of atmospheric sulfur pollution. Decades of logging, mining, and mineral processing industry led to depletion of land and degradation of local ecosystems, including air pollution, acidification of soil and lakes, massive loss of vegetation, soil erosion, and so on. This affected all of Sudbury's residents, but especially the Sudbury's First Nations, who were completely excluded historically from the economic development, but very much their ability to sustain traditional livelihoods or participate even in the settler economy was very much impacted by these activities. Importantly, today, both of Sudbury's First Nations have impact benefit agreements and in fact mining partnership agreements with the companies, including with Vale. And a mining partnership was just announced in October of last year at an OECD conference that we attended as part of our research. And Sudbury is now widely recognized in the world for its regreening efforts, including rehabilitation of its tailing piles, depleted land, partial reforestation, cleanups, and so on. And interestingly, Valley, the same company that operates outside of Antonio Pereira, has been very heavily involved in this and has really taken on this mantle as a green champion. So this is an important point for the contrast I want to strike. Of course, Antonio Pereira, you've already seen some images of, is a community that the film is about. This is a community in which there is a valley-operated dam, which is being currently decommissioned and recharacterized into the landscape. The community that is located near the dam is predominantly Afro-descendant and poor. Very few of its residents actually work in Valley's mines because many of the mining workers are bussed in from other cities, including the nearby Mariana. Some of Antonio Pereira's residents work in the work of decommissioning, but generally speaking, the community gets very low economic benefit from the mining operations around. But of course, what it does get is environmental, social, and economic impacts, which abound. And we already heard about the kind of invisible mud and the risk of possible rupture and the fear and anxiety that this generates. But of course, the decommissioning process itself has also led to multiple impacts, such as toxic dust storms, blocked access to the river, which was already contaminated with effluent. And then, of course, resettlement of the local population from the self-rescue zone meant a loss of access to land, people's access to gardens, and so on. Multiple ways of sustaining oneself or kind of subsistence-led, subsistence kind of activities that people use to supplement their other incomes have been impacted. Artisanal gold panning in the river, fishing, small-scale family and subsistence agriculture, and so on. So there is this very striking kind of difference in how these two communities are currently experiencing mining. I'm not going to talk a lot about our methodology because I don't really have time, but it's kind of includes multiple methods, including regulatory mapping, but also field research, observation, social cartography, and so on. Our research is not really nearly complete, and we're still in the process of collecting and analyzing data, but there are two things that I wanted to highlight that we are finding so far. The first of these relates to what we are characterizing as regulatory fragmentation. And this regulatory fragmentation is a consequence of how law governs different areas. And we're not entirely surprised by finding of this fragmentation because in a sense, our hypothesis already anticipated it. But what we are really struck by just how much of it there is and how consequential it is for people's ability to respond to the situation on the ground in Antonio Pereira. So for example, just a couple of examples. Our interviewees, especially those representing the municipality, as well as community associations, talked a lot about how the division of power between municipal, state, and federal governments is causing significant obstacle to meaningful action. So the self-rescue zone itself was created through an emergency declaration, and it is something that multiple interviewees pointed as emblematic of this fragmentation problem. So as was noted in the film, the ZAS effectively represents expropriation of land from residents and its privatization. This was once land within public municipal domain, but creation of the self-rescue zone as a risk mitigation strategy ultimately transferred this land into corporate hands. Valley now manages the ZAS, but it also means it excludes people from it, and it also in some ways ties the municipal authorities' hands to respond to any of the environmental damages that are actually emerging from this context. And even though community are very frustrated with the municipality, in some ways that legal division of labor, which has not transferred the responsibility to the company, but also to the state, does make it very difficult for the municipality to respond. Another example of fragmentation relates to the loss.
May I request you to wind up now?
Okay, so just very quickly, the other issue relates to the lawsuits that are being pursued in order to calculate, to actually, you know, compensate the community. Those have also been split into environmental and socioeconomic kind of lawsuits. And this again makes it impossible to show how interconnected the loss of land is actually with socioeconomic and also knowledge and kind of community consequences. So this is and there we have multiple examples of fragmentation that also relates to how occupational health and safety law operates, how outsourcing within companies creates legal distance as well and makes it impossible for an adequate response. I'm happy to speak to those a little bit in the question period. And if I may just take 1 minute, I wanted to now highlight also this other issue, which is this kind of contrast between what's happening in Antonio Pereira and the wider discourse of green mining, which companies like Vale are very much championing. So in the fall of last year, we were at a conference in Sudbury. It was an OECD conference on mining and communities. And Vale was presented itself as a champion of green, sustainable mining. And the government officials there also think about mining as key to green, sustainable future. And this relates to the discourse of criticality and the need of critical minerals for electrification. The Sudbury story of regreening was the poster child for what is possible in mining, and Vale put itself out as the champion of green mining. And of course, this is a horrendous contrast to Vale's track record in Brazil, and indeed in Mozambique as well, and the kinds of disasters that they have recently recently witnessed were not heard, let's say they were not mentioned during this OECD conference. Now, Vale is also, Vale was presented again as a green champion, key to regreening. We know that in Antonio Pereira, there is also a new kind of community garden project that Vale doesn't necessarily take ownership of, but we suspect it is funded by them. But again, the contrast and the kind of the minuscule action that it represents vis-a-vis the kinds of efforts it takes in other jurisdictions is really shocking. And again, it should be a significant reminder for us to be very mindful and very critical and watchful of this notion of mining being a source of green job, it being kind of key to green transition, when mining companies actually in places that are further afield and out of sight operate with such impunity. I'm sorry I took a little bit longer, but thank you.
You're fine. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No.
Wouldn't you like to kind of sum up all the discussion? And what I would like you to do is to also expand upon this notion of what was the term? Self-sustaining communities? No.
Self-rescue zone.
Yeah, if you could expand upon this notion. But just take your time, whatever you like to say.
Sorry, who is the question to?
It's Ariane.
Would you like to make the remarks, wrapping up the three? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Ariane, can you hear us?
We have 10 minutes, so if you could wrap up the discussion. Shantanu, can you?
Yeah. Hariane, I don't know if you can hear Neera, but basically she's inviting you to wrap up the presentations and also talk a little bit more about the concept of the self-rescue zone, I think, if I got it correctly. Sure. Go ahead.
I answered the question, or I present the second part and I talk and discuss in the second part?
Yes, you should.
Both. So you can, do your presentation, but also if you could just delve a little bit into the concept of the self-rescue zone a little.
Wait a minute. Let's just show you. Wait a minute. Okay. Check. Let me, can you see? Everyone see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
If you could put in the widescreen so we can Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So in territory, we have the dam, né? The dam, the Dr. Dam is here. So what is the self-rescue zone? We have the construction of a dam in a district like Antonio Pereira, like Bento Rodrigues and Mariana, and the other locales. And we have the city or the district or the community who lives here and need to live with the dam. So what is so the self-rescue zone is the location here. You see my mouse? Can you see? No. Yes?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Is the part of the territory with house, with streets. Here is wait a minute. Instituto the Israeli region locates up to 10 kilometers from the dam. So it's here, like here. So in case of breaks, the dam breaks, the dam stayed here. The people and animals and streets are he's living in this area. In an event at potential flood, these people die. Né? Stay living here. So self-rescue zone is a zone by time mood if the doctor then the work to break, it kill everyone stayed here because no one can save. Né? Because when I talk the first time, the people needs in case of collapse, people and animals in the self-rescue zone of Antonio Pereira would have 30 seconds to escape. So no one can escape in 30 seconds in a collapse event. So
Can I just make a compliment? Those self-rescue zones, they don't exist only in Antonio Pereira. It's the area projected if in case of a rupture, that no government aid or mining aid would be able to arrive in time. So the people must save themselves. So they receive training to run as fast as they can to a safe point of safety, a high place. They are instructed to keep their documents at hand and reunited so they don't lose their identities, diplomas, and everything. So it's this self-rescue zone is, we call it a killing zone because no one will save you and you have 30 seconds to save yourself.
I'm gonna stop here because I want to show you something. Wait a minute. Okay.
Anya, would you like to add to this? The self-rescue concept?
I mean, I don't want to step on Hariane's toes, but I guess the only point that I wanted to make is that it is this kind of, this very interesting construction. And actually, Hariane is pulling up precisely Daniel Neri's explanation in the film of the self-rescue zone. I think what's interesting about it is also a device, because the dam in Antonio Pereira is being decommissioned and decharacterized. In principle, when the process is finished, it will be secured, like the tailings will have been covered in a way that makes the dam more stable and no longer capable of rupture. However, the creation of a self-rescue zone creates this permanent new reality where what was once municipal or privately owned land by local community members is now within the company control. It's a risk mitigation strategy that ultimately appropriates and privatizes land or shifts ownership of land. So it's now out of people's access. People are not able to access this because if they do, they're violating this kind of a border and exposing themselves to potential risk. So as Daniel Neri explains it, it's basically an enclosure by the company as well. And I think that's very significant because it privatizes land that was once within a different kind of domain. It changes legal structure of this land.
So may I just intervene? The communities being
yeah.
displaced.
Nira, excuse me. It's Isabel here. I think we should just let Ariane speak now
No,
because
I'm asking a question. I want her to respond. Are
But-
these forest communities? Ariane, would you answer, please? I don't.
ju-
I think
just Nira, just so you know, now it was now the time for Ariane to speak for 12 minutes to provide her comments, and she can of course address your question, but then we will have the Q&A for half an hour. So I think it would be fair now to leave Ariane's develop her own thoughts about the whole situation. Right?
Okay.
Isabel, we gave her 15 minutes and
12,
she had
yes.
her say. That's why I asked.
Hi again. So
Yeah.
the current mining model perpetuates the plundering of water in territory and keeps local population in a state of dependence of mining. It is an extractivist, industrial, and large-scale model that fuels and creates the power and profit of mining companies. Profit that directly impact governments to compensate for the environmental and social damage in community. Municipalities receive the resource in the form of royalty from mining companies operating in Brazilian territories. These resources are not typically invested transparently in the actual improvement of cities' quality of life. It is common to see mining activities, even when endangering society and the environment, legalized by public authorities and facilitated through the relation of laws and environmental license. As a result, a perverse economic and symbolic power dynamic is established between mining and municipalities, depending on the domination of capital in the management and planning of Brazilian cities. This unfair model, supported by capitalist negligence and profits about lives, is responsible for intensification, environment, and human destruction in Brazil. Here we discuss about tailings dams, the environment damage caused by predatory mining, the suffering of people forced to coexist with mining, and the deaths, mainly of workers, caused by the activities before the criminal disaster of Mariana and Brumadinho. 289 people were killed by the tailing, and over 600,000 people continue to suffer for the negligence of mining companies and the constant loss of rights. Starting in 2015 and 2009, the world began to take note of two of the biggest disasters of the century: the collapse of the Fundão Dam in Mariana, the industrial disaster with the greatest environmental impact in Brazil history, and the largest tailing dam disaster in the world, and the collapse of the Córrego do Feijão mine, dams in Brumadinho, the deadliest workplace accident in Brazil, and the second largest industrial disaster of the century. It is impossible to talk about mining without discussing two disaster crimes committed in Mariana and Brumadinho. And in Guaicuy, we say crime, not just disaster, because it is a crime. These events serve as indication of what mining has caused and continue to cause. We live in an era marked by climate change, the rise of conservative and extremist government, and consequently, the weakness of environmental laws and human rights. 90 years have passed since the crime disaster in Mariana and 6 years since the collapse of the Brumadinho dams. No one has been arrested. Fines have not been paid, ways of lives have not been restored, and the possibility of further collapse remains an imminent tragedy that could occur all the territory at any moment. The impact of mining with outlet techniques and the reduced production costs of the expensive of population safe have been felt in Brazil since colonial times. There is nothing new. Is a country with over 20,000 dams, 928 of which are mining related. New collapse are real possibilities that could impact lives of the world. This is the case in Antonio Pereira, where in January 2020, the Emergency Action Plan for Mining Dams was activated due to instability and increased risk of collapse of Vale's Dr. Dam. The population of Antonio Pereira lives with the damage caused by dam terrorism and invisible mud, a concept that defines the uncertainty surround the potential collapse of a mining dam and highlights the harms this insecurity causes to the community and the environment. The district population is directly affected by the unsettling of water and then will collapse. The depopulation of the area due to the forced removal of residents from the self-rescue zone. The damage caused by the decharacterization work of the Dr. Dam. The destruction of natural habitat, increased poverty, sexual exploitation of women and children, mining dust, violence, loss of freedom, water shoots, food insecurities, job loss, restrictions of economic activities, and the persecutions of community leaders by mining companies. These and many other rights are violated daily by multi-million-dollar companies that continue to profit from minor restrictions with infringing on basic human rights such as food, work, security, housing, and health. The pain we take now will determine the survival of thousands of people in Brazil. We need a new mining model on that prioritizes popular survival of mining. The fight against predatory mining is part of a broad structure for a more just, equal, and sustainable world, where human beings are prioritized, labor is valued, and the environment is preserved. Discussing a new mining model means recognizing people as more than resources to be exploited and territory as more than place to extract all the wealth. The capitalist vision of profit for profit's sake puts both the environment and people at risk, ignoring ignorance and the rights. This approach must be changed and regulated by social and environmental criteria, not just economic ones. The fight against predominant mining is not just an environmental issue, but also a struggle for social justice and human rights. This connects with other movements advocacy for a more equal and sustainable world, where human labor is valued and nature is respected. Mining as current practice perpetuates a cycle of exploitation and destructions. It is crucial to break away from the capitalist mindset of profits and end costs and adopt a model that prioritizes people and the planet. We need mining this is social just, environmentally responsible, and economically sustainable. This paradigm shift is essential to secure a future for all people in the planet. This is an immense challenge, a fight that unfortunately strikes against the population due to the power and wherever of mining companies. Currently, the residents of Antonio Pereira are at risk of losing the right to independent technical advisory. As acquirement was a much popular struggle, this right is end now on the next month. Independent technical advisory services are a guarantee of other rights. Through the work of the advisories, the population gains access to information about the reparation process, can articulate the damage suffered, and recognize human rights violations. This service helps communities organize, share information, and develop a collective awareness of the need to defend their rights. Given all this, we at Guaicuy Institute stand alongside the people affected by tailing dams and predatory mining. We must engage in more discussion at event, university, and with civil society about the damage caused by mining. Only by understanding the tailing dams and the current mining model put the entire world at risk can we apply pressure and change the laws. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for the chance to have this discussion and at today's workshop. May our dialogue not end here. So I just show you for you Antonio Pereira, né?
Thank you.
Ela desde 2007, nesse mês, agora 6, 7 e pouco, tinha vida aqui nesse lugar. Tinha vida aqui. Que eu espalhei, Marcelo. Nossa, mãe, lotava de gente. Era alegria, você tá montando bandeirinha, a gente ajudando, lavava a rua depois. Os vizinhos, a gente se convivia muito bem com a vizinhança aqui.
Ariane?
I'm sorry. We'll have to stop for a moment and receive questions. Maybe you could respond to them. Komal, I'm in a meeting. Could respond to them in a way, right? I'm in a meeting. I'll just talk to you.
I can.
Yeah, Hariane. I was wondering if we could have the questions and then you could answer them. I don't know if my voice is...
Yes, we can hear you, Nira. So thank you very much, Ariane, for your presentation as well. So as the time is passing by, we would start the Q&A. So time for the questions. So people in the chat can write the questions and also say if they are addressed to a specific speaker or not. And afterwards we can let the speaker answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hariane. Thank you, panelists, all three of you. It's been very, very enlightening. Lee, do we have any questions already registered with us? All right. The presentations are open for questioning, and the participants will please ask specific questions of specific participants. Who's going to begin?
I'd be happy to
Isabella,
ask. Yes, thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Ariane, Karina, Anya, for the super interesting session. This is really a very moving case. I must say it is very clear that we are speaking about the life of people who are totally disrupted and destroyed potentially by these extractive practices coming from here one corporation, Vale. And of course, this is not a single case on the face of the planet, as we know that we are in this push for rare earth material to power the energy transition. So this is of high concern. I wanted to raise one dimension which is really at the center of our democratizing work perspective, which is that we have been trying to highlight the deep connections between the need to democratize with the quest for decarbonizing or remediating the planet. That is, if we want to protect the environment, if we want to save the planet, actually, this is not going to go without democratizing work. And here we have a very clear case, because in the name of this energy transition, supposedly we would need more and more extraction. But what we see is that almost immediately the extraction in these specific conditions, under these conditions of exploitation, actually generate the opposite result. It's not the environmental transition or the conservation of the planet that we are getting. It is very much the contrary, the destruction of these zones in terms of human conditions, human living conditions, biodiversity, etc. So my question was more this sharing this point, and I would love to ask you to elaborate a bit more around demands for democratization that you might have seen coming from the workers. And I can pinpoint here to what I heard about the safety assessments that clearly workers are making. And Karina was very clear about that. Workers, because they are on site every day, they see how things are moving, and they can actually anticipate usually quite well about the risks, but they have no rights to share their views, and not even speaking about having their views respected and having a veto about working under such conditions. So how about the demand for serious governing rights of these exploitation that could be maybe voiced at also the governmental level, which could come as an ally to these workers, and also from the community side. From the community side, it's very clear that the decisions of the Vale Corporation is actually literally governing the life of these people. It is a question of life and death. So it is, from a theoretical perspective, very clear that the people should be in a position to validate or veto these decisions, taking about their own life, their own future. And so how about the representation of the community, which is not affected, which is literally governed by this entity, which is actually a political entity governing their life? Thank you very much.
Anya, you had talked about this aspect. So would you like to respond? And then the other two panelists can respond.
I can briefly say something perhaps about the workers, because we haven't yet had an opportunity to do our kind of focus groups or discussions with groups of workers, except for people who identified as care providers. But we haven't talked to mining workers, except for discussions that we've had and interviews we've carried out with union representatives who are mining workers but have risen to a role of a union rep. And what we heard from union kind of representatives, both in the mining, in the like those that represent mining workers proper, as well as outsourced workers who are working in the wider ecosystem that is mining. What we heard is that health and safety concerns are brought up by workers on a regular basis. Yes, they are afraid to speak up sometimes, or sometimes they're ignored, but it is not necessarily because of absence of law. Occupational health and safety law does create certain kinds of channels for workers to voice those concerns. But because of the power in the companies and the hold that these companies have on communities, workers are, yes, either afraid, or those structures are not working properly because of corruption and because companies essentially put workers on occupational health and safety communities who are their people. And so it's about enforcement of these occupational health and safety rules, much as it is about them not, the power dynamics. And the other related problem is that, I talked about legal fragmentation and the fact that different legal norms operate also in different sorts of sectors. And mining is no longer, like, even though Vale is the mining company, it outsourced. There's a lot of work that goes into mining that is not just the pure work of extraction. There are infrastructure projects, so road building, dam building, building of buildings themselves. Like, there's engineering work, all sorts of activities are within this wider ecosystem. And a lot of this has been outsourced to other companies or subsidiaries of Vale that are kind of shielded from the view. And the way that occupational health and safety law operates is that the mining code has the strictest levels of standards for social and environmental kind of protection, but that only operates for mining proper. And then all the outsourced activities, there's other regulation that applies to them with lesser standards. So, and sometimes Vale doesn't outsource full activities, sometimes it just outsources equipment. And then even lesser levels of scrutiny and legal regulation apply. So this creates for workers, even when they want to enact and unions, who want to maybe push certain kinds of environmental issues and social kind of and lapses of occupational health and safety on the agenda, it creates multiple obstacles for them. So it's the kind of legal fragmentation really contributes to, it generates problems, it creates kind of conflicts of rights, and it contributes to, it creates a very difficult environment for even those workers and unions who want to, who are, not totally beholden to companies, and because they're also members of these communities, it creates impossible problems sometimes for them. That is just at least what we heard from talking to workers, but also from doing our regulatory mapping.
Karina, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would like to complement. I live in Mariana, né? I live and I'm surrounded by the mining. The mining. I wake up with the mining, even though I don't live nearby the mines, because from my bedroom I listen to the trucks carrying the dust and the rejects. And I also listen to the workers going to work because their buses passes nearby. And about the democracy, not only in the working process, but in all the mining processes. I'll only tell you, give an example. Samarco is expanding its operation again. It's called expansion to 2025 this year. They're going to expand the operation in about 60%. And the city held a public audience with the citizenship to discuss the issue. It was announced with no, it wasn't announced with little advance. It was near Christmas, and there wasn't a popular participation. So they comply to the regulations in form, but not in the content. They go around the regulations that they are strict and they exist, and in a way they are applied, but in the form. But in the content, they're not applied. The city, I've been living here for 11 years. And now the city has an estimated, I think it's fluctuant, population of 30,000 people connected to mining sector. So when I go to the supermarket or a restaurant, we see waves of workers that are not from here. And we see this because of their accents, and they tell us their stories, because I'm a journalist, so we're listening, my students are listening, and they come from all Brazil to work here. And sometimes with outsourced work, as Anya pointed out, but they choose to stay here to pursue other jobs. So the problems created in health, infrastructure, housing, the population in street conditions spiked. And all sectors of the city, the traffic in the city is terrible because the trucks and the buses are much more visible. But in spite of all this, the least seen actors in the mining process are the workers. Even Vale, as the rupture in Brumadinho, which was a labor crime because of the amount of workers who died, the workers are not recognized there as labor force. And in the journalist coverage about Mariana, about Barão de Cocais, about Brumadinho and Antonio Pereira, the mining workers are not seen and are not heard. They are invisible. This is a problem.
Thank you. Can we move on to other questions? Anybody from the audience? I'm sorry, is there a language issue? Can someone speak?
No, I mean, I don't think this is a language issue in that way, and you're audible, so that's not a problem.
Hariane, would you like to add then to Karina and Anya's comments? Oh dear, she's got a bad cold. I have it too, climate change. Yeah.
Just, I want to say something. Right now, Vale does not recognize all the people in the district as affected people. It does not recognize the traditional people and communities, and the people who continue to live in the territory and suffer from all the damage caused by the Dr. Dam. Today, the damage to the affected people have not been assessed, and there are no parameters for reparations. The mining company control everything, and Guaicuy Institute, wait a minute.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I think we are reaching towards the end of our time. So yes, please, Anya.
May I just, I mean, when Ariane comes back, I think she should finish her thought. But the thing that I wanted to just highlight, I know we are focusing here on Antonio Pereira and this story, and I think it's a very important story because it highlights just also the kind of how dangerous this wider discourse of criticality and critical minerals is, because mining companies are very sophisticated, and they have been manipulating this discourse around sustainable extraction being possible for quite a long time. Really, it's since the 90s that they've been talking about sustainability in mining. And now the criticality and the energy transition is fueling this idea further. And really, when we were at this conference in Sudbury, which was the OECD conference of mining and communities, the way in which the company presents itself, it's like the key environmental actor in this community. And it is true that in Sudbury, there has been an enormous shift and economic diversification, an enormous effort that has gone on into cleaning up this community. But it was not just companies. Companies were forced into this. It was really community actors, the university, the local regulators, that really, it was a huge community and wide kind of network effort. The companies somehow inserted themselves into this with resources and so on, and they're really using this story, and Valley is a key guilty party here. They're using this story to project this image of a very benevolent actor who is concerned with indigenous consultation and with environmental track record. And so the story, like Antonio Pereira, just illustrates how false a note that is, because it is really not true when you look at their track record in other countries, like in Brazil, which is where Vale is from. And this is like an extreme example of environmental racism at the local scale, because it's within the Ouro Preto municipality. Antonio Pereira is a specifically affected community. Bento Rodrigues was, of course, as well, very tragically so. But these are communities where there is a racial dimension, there is a class dimension. And then we see this also replicated at like a larger geopolitical scale, where in Canada, these companies act very differently now than they do in the so-called global south. But I think it's very important that these stories see light, because they really illustrate that this is just a spin. It's like it's a lie, and it's just very, yeah, like it's tragic that we and policymakers, unfortunately, and regulators and politicians are fully complicit in this, because in Canada, the local government, the provincial government, the federal government, they're all adopting critical mining strategies, and they're all pushing this agenda as well. Canada is a resource economy. Brazil is one as well. So I think it's very important that we really are careful in unpacking always this discourse around criticality and green mining, because it's just a cover-up. And I sound like a conspirational theorist, but that's really not the case. This is very clear in this case.
Okay, I'll wind up, then I'll ask Isabella to talk about the next workshop. You know, this was so evocative, so moving, and so reminiscent of whatever is happening in India. I just have 2 points to make. I mean, I could take off because we've been dealing with this issue for a long time. I'm not even talking about international division of the working class. I'm talking about the fragmentation of the working class within the global south. On the one hand, you have waged workers in fairly privileged positions with provident funds and fixed salaries who are working in government-owned companies or the companies of big industrialists. On the other hand, you have what can best be termed as primitive accumulation. I mean, this is dispossession of entire communities. It's Marxist primitive accumulation, where you're dispossessing an entire community of their access to natural resources and their access to community life. We did some work, my team and I, in Western India, where this very big river was being dammed for industrialists, and the water has been used. We asked the women there, they were relocated in the state of Gujarat, which incidentally is a prohibition state. Now, these are tribal women, and they would say, you know, we've been relocated in a place where we cannot drink, we cannot smoke, which they do in their forests. And then she said something very interesting. She said, we don't have the freedom to change our husbands. I found that I was so envious, I can't tell you. Because, you know, caste women are supposed to pray that you marry the same man for the next 7 births. Tribal women work, so they expect their husbands to perform their duties the best they can, and they just throw them out. If that empowerment of women has been completely neutralized by relocating them, we cannot even understand the enormous dents that have been made in their culture. Their access to water, their access to the forest, their access to natural resources. The lives of entire communities have been destroyed. They've been banished to shanty towns. The second is something I wanted to pick up on, Karina's right to voice. You know, the language of the public sphere we have to understand which might resonate with industrialists at least and the government is the language of Max Weber, legal entitlement to land. Now, at least in India, forest communities or many village communities do not have entitlement to land. They practice shifting agriculture and they don't have a notion of inheritance also. They're very democratic. They burn their huts the moment as their father dies. In between the state, and I'm using the state, the oligarch state, which is becoming increasingly common, and the person who is displaced, the community that has been displaced, step in activists who are familiar with the language of the public sphere, who are familiar with legal entitlement to property, all the papers that are needed to establish your ownership of property. I just wonder, when will people get voice themselves? When will they start speaking for themselves? Because we are speaking for them, it is true. But it's not people speaking for themselves. We can never understand their pain, their desperation, it's a matter of, as Isabel said, life and death. And very often we ask, I mean, since I've written on civil society, one would ask NGOs, guys, how long are you going to make them dependent upon you? And they would turn back and say, oh, you armchair intellectuals, you don't know what you're talking about. We don't know what we're talking about because the right to voice is so important. And thank you, Karina, for that presentation because it resonated a great deal. Thank you, Hariane. It was really, really very evocative. And Anya, you made us understand what the implications were. This has been a great evening. It's been very, very moving. I mean, I'm moved to tears by what is happening in the interest of private accumulation. I mean, yeah, I suppose this is all private profit, which is probably being sent abroad. Yeah. Isabel, would you like to tell us about the next workshop? And then we can...
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Nira, for the cheering, and thank you to our 3 fantastic panelists. It's been absolutely insightful, and we will think more about all this. So next time we meet, hopefully, it's coming very soon. It's on March 28th. It's a workshop on the workers in the Global South who are actually powering artificial intelligence. So that's another side of this whole transition that will I think, very much speak to the Valley's case today, structurally speaking. So if you are available to join us, I think it is going to be extremely insightful too, and will feed our understanding of why we need to move forward with democratizing, decommodifying, and decarbonizing work and the planet. So thank you so much. And the information is in the chat. The link is in the chat that will lead you to the WageIndicator webpage. Thank you so much, Shantanu and the WageIndicator Foundation, for the fantastic support